My name is Jacob Coates, and this is ApplePay and a willingness to spend. So let's start off through an introduction and introducing some context to the situation. So ApplePay is a contactless payment widespread throughout the U.S. It met a need after the COVID pandemic for a need of contactless payment method. In addition to this, high schoolers are marked with low financial literacy and poor spending habits, most commonly spend thrifts, and they are also the most frequent users of ApplePay. This creates a problem because no research has been done to investigate how ApplePay specifically affects the minds of consumers. Especially, none of this has been applied to high schoolers in particular, who are the most common users of ApplePay. So this brings us to our research goal of to explore how ApplePay influences how much high schoolers spend and save in the short term in comparison to other common payment methods such as cash and debit cards. A single stop at the store will be defined as short-term spending for this paper. Why should you care? Well, if something so small as the way you pay for something can influence how much you spend or save, that is very important not only for the youth who this affects, but also as for everyone else, because we're all consumers and we all spend money. And a helpful spending habit is always very helpful. Nice to come by. This brings us to our literature review. Okay, so willingness to pay is how willing a consumer is to trade away their money. This is affected by two things, convenience and pain of payment. Pain of payment was initially coined in 1996 by Zellermeyer as the notion that a consumer who pays for a product or service experiences emotions associated with the act of paying. So in essence, you give away money, you feel pain in your psyche for actually giving something away that was yours. Pain of payment is influenced by three things: payment coupling, payment magnitude, and payment method. And the more pain you experience, the less willing you are to pay. So payment coupling refers to the extent to which the decision to purchase or spend is temporarily associated with the actual parting of money. This is best represented through debit card and credit card. With debit card, the money from your account is withdrawn automatically. With credit card, it is withdrawn when you decide to pay off that credit card. So credit cards have a weak payment coupling. Debit cards have a stronger payment coupling. A strong payment coupling makes you less willing to pay. Next is magnitude. It is, in essence, how much you choose to spend on a purchase. I think this one's pretty straightforward. Spending $100 versus $10, you're a lot more willing to spend the $10 versus $100. And finally, payment method. It refers to the differences between two monetary instruments that are identical in coupling and face value, but different in terms of physical appearance. So, payment method is influenced by the transparency of a payment method, which affects the pain of payment, which affects the willingness to pay. And the transparency of a payment method is the relative salience of the payment method, both in terms of physical form and the amount relative to paying by cash. So you can see cash as basically how money is defined. Like, this is $5 cash, it's pretty straightforward. This is the most transparent. And then when you get further and further away from that, more obscure, less transparent, it makes you less willing to pay. So in this case, debit and mobile pay are seen as almost equal in transparency. So therefore, what past research suggests is that you are less willing to pay with cash and more willing to pay with debit and mobile pay. Finally, convenience. More convenient a payment method is, the more you'd be willing to pay. Convenience is affected by familiarity and context, familiarity with the technology associated with the payment method. The more familiar you are with the technology, the more willing you would be to pay, and also any given context of how convenient something is. And when you're standing in line for a store, it's a lot easier to pull out your phone and tap on Apple Pay when having to pull out your wallet and having to actually sort out the money. So a brief research goal reminder is to explore how ApplePay influences how much high schoolers spend and save in the short term in comparison to other common payment methods, cash and debit cards. A single stop at the store is defined as short-term spending. This brings us to our methodology. These are going to be our tested variables. The coupling and magnitude are both going to be controlled Payment method is the actual tested variable with testing with ApplePay, debit, and cash. And we can control context, but we can't really control familiarity. So this is going to be looked at as a secondary scope for this research. So for participants, 36 high school students, 27 seniors, 7 juniors, and 2 sophomores were recruited for this experiment. They were recruited through questionnaires sent by email, which collected basic demographic information and also familiarity with payment methods to be used as the secondary scope for this research. So this experiment is a deception study based off of Soman's original photocopy cards in 2003, and I used this experiment as a parent experiment because it displayed a cause and effect relationship between payment method and a willingness to pay, which is what exactly I'm trying to do. Step 1 for this procedure, I assigned 3 possible conditions: ApplePay, credit, and debit card. I broke up the participants, 12 in each assigned group. Then, individually, participants were given developed pictures of their school to look through. And after they were done looking through them for a little bit, they were told you are helping out the school's admissions office by selecting pictures that would be used in an admissions booklet, whose purpose is to advertise your school to future students. Each picture that you select will cost the school 25 cents to develop and print out in their admission booklet. Please select pictures that you believe will best represent all aspects of your school. While you may choose as many pictures as you want, please keep in mind that your school is trying to conserve money on this project. After that little spiel, they were given $20 and they're given the assigned payment method. For ApplePay, they were given a phone with $20 on ApplePay, debit card or Visa card with $20 on it, and then for cash, they were given 19 $1 bills and 4 quarters. And then they were told this is $20 of the school's money to be used in this assignment. After you have chosen the pictures to include, you will pay for the development of these photos with this money. Let me know once you've made your final decisions of what pictures to include. So afterwards, they sorted through the photos, and then when they made their final decision, it was a simulated transaction because, again, this was a deception study. Didn't really care about the photos they chose, and we weren't really buying the photos. So it was simulated in order to make them believe that this was actually happening. And finally, the participants were debriefed, and the total number of photos were counted, and the total cost was calculated as the dependent variable. All right, so to bring it to the results and discussion, these are the results from that main scope of research. We had debit card and ApplePay were tied with their mean value, almost tied, with 21.92 for ApplePay and 22 for debit card for mean photos bought. This shows that overall, with ApplePay and debit card, participants were more willing to spend with ApplePay and debit card, and this has to do with the transparency of that payment method because they're so linked close together. Cash was seen, had the lowest mean at 17.83, which shows that participants who were assigned in the cash group were the less willing to pay for photos and to actually go through the transaction. And also to show how similar ApplePay and debit card were, ApplePay had a high of 50, a low of 7. Debit card had a high of 47, a low of 13. Again, they're very similar in that respect. Cash had a low of 3 and a high of 32. So again, this is showing that ApplePay and debit card, you're going to be more willing to spend due to transparency, due to the lack of transparency. When compared with cash, you're going to be a lot less willing to spend. Now with the secondary scope of research, looking at familiarity, participants' familiarity was plotted against how much that group spent overall, and the cash group had a correlation value of 0.69. This shows that the more familiar you were with cash, the more willing you would be to spend. This correlation value started dropping thereafter with debit card with 0.28 and ApplePay with 0 overall with no correlation. This was contrary to past research because past research suggested that due to convenience going up from familiarity, also the amount someone would pay would go up, but this wasn't the case here. So now this all creates another problem because cash was seen as the way to reduce your spending the most, and Apple Pay and debit card where you would spend the most with these payment methods. And this creates a problem because only 24.9% would actually always or often use cash, in comparison to 47% and 45% with Apple Pay and debit card would always use Apple Pay and debit card. So this is showing even though this exists, people aren't using this. They aren't using this sort of almost like kind of cheat in a way, where if you just use cash, you could reduce how much you pay for things and how much you spend. And also, in addition to this, 50% of people tested never use cash, never or rarely use cash. Again, creating that problem that cash is this thing where people can use it to help them save money, but people aren't using it. And what people spend the most on debit card, again, people are using the most. So implications of this is this can be used to educate youth as cash continues to fade away from use, as shown by our data again. Also, in addition to this, spendthrifts should avoid using Apple Pay and debit card on impulse buys. While they both have their uses for daily transactions, but if you're commonly a spendthrift, this would be more useful for that person, especially as a youth, to be using cash. And overall, this can be applied to everyone because anyone can use this to help save themselves some money. Limitations, the obvious limitations were the population. A greater population would be helpful in obtaining more statistical significance. In addition to this, it would be helpful testing people from other schools and other walks of life, but that really wasn't as much considered. So that in future research, that would be suggested to test other populations to see if these trends continue. In addition to this, the convenience of context was controlled, and this is a big part of how Apple Pay is used because it's so convenient in any given context. And since this is controlled, this could have had a major limitation upon my research. In addition to this, short-term versus long-term, this is only looking at the short-term effects of using each payment method, but there are a variety of long-term effects. For example, using credit card, you can build credit cards, credit score, and there's different things like how other research showed that when you're paying for something with a certain payment method, how it could actually influence the next payment methods and just continue to go on in the future. So future research would address short-term versus long-term and also the convenience of context. That's it.
Thanks, Jacob. The panel has 3 questions for you.
All right, Jacob. So how did you determine which results generated in your research method were the most important for informing your new understanding?
Okay, so because I was basing my entire deception study off of Soman's original 2003 photocopy cards experiment, the data he used to get he used in his discussion and his results was the actual mean of how much each participant overall chose to spend. So that's why I used that. I believed it was the best to evaluate this particular research question.
My question would be real-world implications of your research. What can you point to?
I can mostly point to the ability to help reduce not only youth spending, but everyone's spending. That just by if you're commonly a spendthrift, or if you spend a lot of money or impulse buy or whatever, just using cash instead in those contexts, if you know you're prone to spending a lot of money in that way, where if you just using cash, you could help reduce that a significant amount, and that way maybe help just build better spending habits overall.
So I know you've been working on this for a long time, Jacob. So if you could revisit your research process, what would you do differently and why?
I would change my population because if we wanted to go back, I got originally like 27 seniors and then 7 juniors and then 2 sophomores. That was very disproportionate. is I originally wanted just to do seniors, but there wasn't enough seniors who were willing to help out with this, because I believe seniors were closest to adulthood. Their information would be the most useful to a broader population. So I would either like visit other schools, get information from them, from their seniors, or I would go out with the entire idea of seniors and just say all high school students and get a proportional amount of seniors, juniors, sophomores, freshmen.
Terrific, thank you.